I'm Art Wells, and I find things. If I'm stuck on a problem or uncertain about a decision, I go for a walk and I look for things to guide me, and they do. Here's an example. I was thinking about a project and walking, and I saw one of those rubber finger cones on the sidewalk, those thimble-like things used for counting money or separating sheets. I thought about what it could mean as a clue or a symbol. Simply counting things seemed too obvious to me, so I threw that one out. I started thinking about the project as layers that aren't easily separated, and that helped. Layers instead of steps. I thought about what I could do to separate these layers. I also thought about how sometimes people will use their spit and lick their fingers in order to make papers move more easily. In movies, sometimes people will spit in their hands and rub them together before hard work. Do I need to work harder at separating the layers of my project? It didn't really help that much, but it did help me think about things differently. I'll go into my methods of finding things and interpreting them in more detail later. I don't think finding guidance in random objects is anything special or magical. For a long time, people all over the world have been using omens, signs, divinations to guide their thoughts. I haven't done a deep study or survey, but it seems to happen everywhere, and for as long as history remembers. Maybe you do something like this, whether regularly or just very memorable or playful moments. Maybe you'd like to get started with this as a regular practice, or learn a new method or two. I'm going to go through some of my methods, guide you through some simple exercises that might help you, and discuss related subjects, all in pursuit of refining a practice of creative thinking and mental exploration. This recording is a test. I don't know how far I'm going to go in creating a podcast or just use this as notes for a book. It depends on how I feel after I produce this and what kind of reaction I get. As I go, I'll mention that I will cover certain topics later. I mean by that to say that these topics might be later potential recordings. If things go well, I might even start recording walks, maybe in video, to help explain my explorations, the things I find, and what they mean to me. The things I find aren't special. I just find them to be special. This is a helpful practice in mindfulness in general. How are the things you are experiencing right now special? How about your experiences a few hours ago? Letting your mind freely judge and appreciate your environment is a simple process that encourages clearer thinking later. Rather than stepping around your environment, dismissing it as common or understood, step into it. Allow your mind to let go of the handrails and dive into whatever you find. This practice is exhausting to do very long and can have its own sort of numbing effect for me, but it also relieves me from anxieties and destructive cyclical thinking. It distracts me from fears and at least briefly sets down whatever burden I've been carrying too long in my thoughts. The practice has become more like a poetry, though not very eloquent. Each object is a writing prompt and I fill in the meaning. I think of my stuck brain like writer's block. It's not that I can't think of an answer to my question, nor is it that the answer can't exist. I'm just staring terrified at a blank canvas. But then an accidental paint splash gets something to paint around or about, and I'm progressing. The circular thinking has spun up centrifugal force, and once the orbital constraints show a crack, my thoughts fling out free. Sometimes, often, my thinking just hits another barrier, and the process just starts again. But at least I'm not spinning in the same orbit. I stretch. I walk more. The things I find aren't special. I find trash, litter for my littered thinking to distract myself just long enough to allow surprise thoughts to sneak in. I try to give the accidental and discarded meaning, and I end up giving myself guidance and insight. Later, I'll spend some time explaining why I think trash is particularly suited for this practice, but mostly it's just because it doesn't carry a lot of meaning or value. It's just an ink blot when I find it. I will be going through some simple exercises you can start doing today. For some, you don't even need to walk or really move. Some of them I've deliberately stolen from traditional fortune telling and divination. Some I might have made up on my own. But first, a little cautionary advice. The temptation to start believing in divination or to become superstitious is pretty strong when you turn to find things for guidance. I fight that temptation very often, particularly when I see something surprisingly appropriate or very disruptive. This happens often, and the temptation doesn't go away with frequent practice. Sometimes it's as if the things I find are themselves bringing the order, or suggesting a greater path or power. It can be very helpful to frame things that way as an exercise, but it isn't as productive to embrace it. I'll cover that later in greater depth. Our brains are built to make meaning of the messes of the world, particularly when they are strictly messes. It's one of the key skills of our survival as a species. Making sense of messes might even be why we bother thinking at all. But this skill, like any other advantageous skill, can overstep its realm, and that causes problems. I suggest you don't think of these signs as having a higher meaning, or even a guiding suggestion, all on their own. They just offer an opportunity to learn something about your thinking and how you operate in the world. Not an arrow, but a mirror, or a note passed while you're just going on and on about unhelpful things. If you are a practitioner of divination and oracles, or believe in guiding spirits or gods, or even just believe in synchronicity or luck, that's great. Just try not to bring it into your practice. Just play with what you find, and let that play release your thinking. The simplest exercise I do doesn't involve walking, or even really moving all that much, and I do it fairly often. It's a coin toss. Think of a yes or no question that's been on your mind. Should I take a class at the community center? Should I try to get a dinner party together? How about some gardening? It doesn't even have to be an important thing. In fact, if you're just starting out, it's best that it isn't. It just needs to be something about which you're genuinely undecided. Briefly go through this question's possible answers, yes or no, and their reasons. Don't deep dive or do a complete inventory of pros and cons. Just remind yourself of your indecision and get the lay of the land. Now get ready to flip a coin. Heads is yes, tails is no, and you have to stick to it. If a coin isn't handy, just search flip a coin in a browser. Or just pause here because I'm about to flip a coin for you. Are you ready? It's heads. Yes. How does that make you feel? If you regret it, what is the first reason to come to mind? What words or feelings come to mind? If you are relieved, what was freeing about the result? How did your mind celebrate? If you feel burdened by the result, what is the heaviest thought you are holding? Did you feel neutral? Great. Just go with a random solution. It's not that big of a deal to you. Flipping a coin is a gamble. When I do it, the pros and cons are chips scattered on the table in chaotic mounds. Only when the gamble is resolved can I reckon it all. Sometimes I'm surprised by the amount or the dearness of what I risked. My thoughts are so noisy with shoulds and musts, desires and fears, that they cluster into opaque groups while I try to sort them all out. All the reasons for the shoulds disappear behind one big should. Whatever opposes that just becomes a big don't want to. By surrendering my will to a coin toss, the opposing groups splinter and regain their individual voices. In committing to a random selected choice, I hear again all that really drives me. The reliefs or regrets become more readily accessible. I can see them afresh and hear them using a more urgent voice. Now forget about the question and the flip results and just contemplate that feeling when you heard the results. Just the feeling, not the results. If it was at all surprising or disruptive, the experience was a success. You have new guidance within you. Sit with it, and when you are ready, let it guide you. If you find that everything is still muddy and the coin flip didn't help, maybe you need to take a break and try again, or try another exercise, or talk to somebody for new ideas, or read a book. Mostly either distract your thinking or send it through some risks. Anyway, this is the simplest exercise I do. It helps when I'm being indecisive about something maybe important, but so low stakes that I can't get worked up about it. Or when I make a decision and I just want to check in with myself again. I don't often go with the coin's decision, but I do learn more about my thinking and proceed more confidently with whatever I decide. I also don't use a coin. I have spinner rings with numbers, playing cards, tarot decks. This gives me a chance to move away from simple 50-50 odds. Sometimes I go with something arbitrarily weighted, like jacks are better or 62 or better, favoring the side I think I am least likely to do. The choice between even or uneven odds itself, if impulsive enough, also helps me learn about my thinking. There are so many other phenomena that can be used this way. Whether or not a light will change by the time I get there, odd or even cars passing by a specific time. Is it before or after 4 p.m. now? I do find comfort in habits, but it's best for me to stay away from too much method. Avoiding any sort of orthodoxy is key when I'm trying to disrupt my thinking. If you've gotten this far and don't explore more with me, I encourage you to continue looking into other exercises and methods. And most importantly, come up with some of your own. So I find things and they help me think. I want to go on about it, and I've got a lot more to say. I've taken a couple of runs at writing a book about this, but I really couldn't find a voice for it, so I thought I'd just try saying it. If nothing else, it'll help me write. Scripting this by itself has been a great exercise. Let me know what you think and what you find. Maybe you'll hear from me again.